and hath overcome his foes by the shearing of swords and guileful tricks, and hath come back home to his own folk, they praise him, and bless him, and crown him with flowers, and boast of him before God in the minster, for his deliverance of friend and folk and city. Why shouldst thou be worse to me than this? Now all is said, my dear and my friend. Farewell, farewell." Therewith she turned and went her ways toward the house in all speed, but making somewhat of a compass. And when she was gone, Walter knelt down and kissed the place where her feet had been, and arose thereafter, and made his way toward the house, he also, but slowly, and staying oft on his way. CHAPTER 17. Of the house and the pleasance in the wood. On the morrow morning Walter loitered a while about the house till the morn was grown old, and then about noon he took his bow and arrows, and went into the woods to the northward, to get him some venison. He went somewhat far ere he shot him a fawn, and then he sat him down to rest under the shade of a great chestnut tree, for it was not far past the hottest of the day. He looked around thence, and saw below him a little dale with a pleasant stream running through it, and he bethought him of bathing therein. So he went down, and had his pleasure of the water and the willowy banks, for he lay naked a while on the grass, by the lip of the water, for joy of the flickering shade and the little breeze that ran over the down-long ripples of the stream. Then he did on his raiment, and began to come his ways up the bent, but had scarce gone 3 steps ere he saw a woman coming towards him from downstream. His heart came into his mouth when he saw her, for she stooped and reached down her arm, as if she would lay her hand on her ankle, so that at first he deemed it had been the maid, but at the second eye shot he saw that it was the mistress. She stood still and looked on him, so that he deemed she would have him come to her. She stood still and looked on him, so that he deemed she would have him come to her. So he went to meet her, and grew somewhat shamefaced as he drew nigher, and wondered at her, for now was she clad but in one garment of some dark grey silky stuff, embroidered with, as it were, a garland of flowers about the middle, but which was so thin that, as the wind drifted it from side and limb, it hid her no more, but for the said garland, than if water were running over her. Her face was full of smiling joy and content, as she spake to him in a kind caressing voice, and said, "I give thee good day, good squire, and well art thou met." And she held out her hand to him. He knelt down before her, and kissed it, and abode still upon his knees, and hanging down his head. But she laughed outright, and stooped down to him, and put her hand to his arms, and raised him up, and said to him, "What is this, my squire, that thou kneelest to me as to an idol?" He said, faltering, "I wot not, but perchance thou art an idol, and I fear thee." "What?" she said, "more than yesterday, whenas thou sawest me afraid?" Said he, "Yea, for that now I see thee unhidden, and meseemeth there hath been none such since the old days of the Gentiles." She said, "Hast thou not yet bethought thee of a gift to crave of me, a reward for the slaying of mine enemy, and the saving of me from death?" "O my lady," he said, "even so much would I have done for any other lady, or forsooth for any poor man, for so my manhood would have bidden me. Speak not of gifts to me then. Moreover," and he reddened therewith, and his voice faltered, "didst thou not give me my sweet reward yesterday? What more durst I ask?" She held her peace a while, and looked on him keenly, and he reddened under her gaze. Then wrath came into her face, and she reddened and knit her brows, and spake to him in a voice of anger, and said, "Nay, what is this? It is growing in my mind that thou deemest the gift of me unworthy. thou, an alien, an outcast, one endowed with the little wisdom of the world without the wood. And here I stand before thee, all glorious in my nakedness, and so fulfilled of wisdom, that I can make this wilderness, to any whom I love, more full of joy than the kingdoms and cities of the world. And thou, but it is the enemy that hath done this, and made the guileless guileful. Yet will I have the upper hand at least, though thou suffer for it, and I suffer for thee. Walter stood before her with hanging head, and he put forth his hands, as if praying off her anger, and pondered what answer he should make, for now he feared for himself and the maid. So at last he looked up to her, and said boldly: "Nay, lady, I know what thy words mean, whereas I remember thy first welcome of me. I wot, forsooth, that thou wouldst call me base born, and of no account, and unworthy to touch the hem of thy raiment, and that I have been overbold and guilty towards thee. And doubtless this is sooth, and I have deserved thine anger, but I will not ask thee to pardon me, for I have done but what I must needs." She looked on him calmly now, and without any wrath, but rather as if she would read what was written in his inmost heart. Then her face changed into joyousness again, and she smote her palms together, and cried out: "This is but foolish talk, for yesterday did I see thy valiancy, and to day I have seen thy goodliness. And I say, that though thou mightest not be good enough for a fool woman of the earthly baronage, yet art thou good enough for me, the wise and the mighty and the lovely. And whereas thou sayest that I gave thee but disdain when first thou camest to us, grudge not against me therefore, because it was done but to prove thee, and now thou art proven." Then again he knelt down before her, and embraced her knees, and again she raised him up, and let her arm hang down over his shoulder, and her cheek brush his cheek, and she kissed his mouth, and said: "Hereby is all forgiven, both thine offence and mine, and now cometh joy and merry days." Therewith her smiling face grew grave, and she stood before him, looking stately and gracious and kind at once, and she took his hand and said: "Thou mightest deem my chamber in the golden house of the wood over queenly, since thou art no masterful man. So now hast thou chosen well the place wherein to meet me to-day, for hard by on the other side of the stream is a bower of pleasance, which, forsooth, not every one who cometh to this land may find. There shall I be to thee as one of the up country damsels of thine own land, and thou shalt not be abashed." She sidled up to him as she spoke, and would he not, her sweet voice tickled his very soul with pleasure, and she looked aside on him, happy and well content. So they crossed the stream by the shallow below the pool wherein Walter had bathed, and within a little they came upon a tall fence of flake hurdles, and a simple gate therein. The Lady opened the same, and they entered thereby into a close, all planted as a most fair garden, with hedges of rose and woodbine, and with linden trees ablossom, and long ways of green grass betwixt borders of lilies and clove gillyflowers, and other sweet garland flowers. And a branch of the stream, which they had crossed erewhile, wandered through that garden, and in the midst was a little house built of post and pan, and thatched with yellow straw, as if it were new done. Then Walter looked this way and that, and wondered at first, and tried to think in his mind what should come next, and how matters would go with him, but his thought would not dwell steady on any other matter than the beauty of the Lady amidst the beauty of the garden, and withal she was now grown so sweet and kind, and even somewhat timid and shy with him, that scarce did he know whose hand he held, or whose fragrant bosom and sleek side went so close to him. So they wandered here and there through the waning of the day, and when they entered at last into the cool dusk house, then they loved and played together, as if they were a pair of lovers guileless, with no fear